Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and today's video is going to be a fun one. In today's video, I'm showcasing a team with unbelievable firepower that just helped a trainer break into the 2900s. Now, these battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, Absol Trained Best, so many thanks for the battle submission. Now, Absol's team features Galarian Moltres as the lead, Shadow Camerupt as the save switch, and Aegislash as the closer. This is a team with a very high skill ceiling, so I don't personally recommend this team for everyone to try out, but watching these battles should be an absolute blast. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game number 1, we see a pretty disastrous lead leading Galarian Moltres into Azumarill. Azumarill is a core breaker for this team, as both Galarian Moltres and the Camerupt are going to struggle quite a bit here. Azumarill will fire off the Ice Beam right away, instant shield comes up from the Galarian Moltres. Galarian Moltres needs to do its best to try and get as much damage onto this Azumarill as possible. Moltres full sends the Brave Bird, Azumarill no shields, and that is a big swing of momentum. Galarian Moltres is going to make the fly, Bubble does go through, but at the very least Galarian Moltres is going to guarantee that it gets the shield back. And that's what Moltres was after. Azumarill going to look to overfarm massively. At this point, Moltres' job is done. Moltres has gotten the Azumarill low, and now it's time for Aegislash to hit the field. Aegislash would be very happy to go for a full charging down. Azumarill will fire off energy. Are they on Hydro Pump? Yes, they are. Opponent's going to pivot. They send in Shadow Gliscor. Shadow Gliscor going to be immediately met with the Gyro Ball. Shadow Ball is the better move to go for here, but either move would still do a ton of damage. Aegislash changes to the Blade form. Gyro Ball is going to get the shield. Gliscor returns fire with the Sand Tomb, but the important thing is in Blade form, Aegislash generates way more energy. So now with the energy head start, it shields, goes back into shield form, it gets the outpace on Gliscor, and makes it to the Shadow Ball. Now this is going to be picking up a one-hit knockout. Aegislash changes back into the Blade form, Shadow Ball takes the one-hit KO, and in the back, they have Cresselia, and this game is over. Aegislash makes the Shadow Ball. Oh, what a catch! Opponent able to save that Cresselia and catch onto the Azumarill. But bad news for the opponent, because now Aegislash is going to pivot out, and in comes Camerupt. Camerupt going to have to deal with a lot of charge attack pressure from this Cresselia, as Cresselia will be able to fire off Grass Knot, and Grass Knot should be able to take the two-hit knockout. But the good news is even though Camerupt had to get sacrificed, Aegislash is such a wall to Cresselia that this game should still be over. In comes Aegislash into the red HP, but Cresselia, even if they fire off the Moonblast, it will simply fall short of securing the knockout. Moonblast is going to land, Aegislash is going to hang on and make it to the Shadow Ball. Aegislash putting the team on his back. You can see the battle research update already. Shadow Ball takes the one-hit knockout, and that is a good game. We move to game number 2, and oh my goodness, what a lead. Galarian Moltres into Jellicent. Opponent immediately safe switches into Shadow Typhlosion, and this looks like trouble. It looks like Typhlosion is actually out-damaging the Camerupt. Shadow Camerupt is a very glassy Pokemon. It looks like Typhlosion is actually going to be able to make a play for switch advantage. That is really not ideal, because that is going to set up Jellicent onto the Aegislash, and presumably they probably have a pretty good answer to the Galarian Moltres. Absol realizes it's futile to try and make a play for switch, and instead is just going to go for farm on Galarian Moltres. Galarian Moltres now gets a massive energy head start, and it's going to need it as the final Pokemon is revealed to be Clodsire. If Absol is ever able to get the final Protect Shield away from the opponent, that would be the opportunity to win the game, and the final Protect Shield just came up. And is that a charge attack priority tie on a Brave Bird? That would be the best case scenario. Brave Bird is going to connect. It is a charge attack priority tie, and this is a very easy no shield. Sludge Bomb is going to connect, taking the knockout, but now Aegislash is here to sweep. And Aegislash can just look to farm up as much energy as it possibly can, getting the shield call right as the opponent full sends the Earthquake. But it really doesn't matter what they throw. This game is over. In comes Jellicent. Jellicent can fire off a Shadow Ball, but this is an Aegislash shield form. It's more than happy to absorb this damage. The shield form tanks the Shadow Ball, builds up to the back-to-back, and that is going to be game over. Aegislash is just absurd. Shadow Ball, one knockout. There's another Shadow Ball for a second knockout. I cannot believe there's anyone who says this Pokemon isn't cracked, but that's going to be another win. The good leads continue in game number 3, Galarian Moltres into Shadow Malamar. The universal truth about Shadow Malamar teams is that every good Shadow Malamar team is ABA weak to Galarian Moltres. They stay in, connect with the superpower, there's a save switch into Diggersby, and this is a very big problem. Diggersby has dominant matchups into both of the back Pokemon, and they end up shielding the Brave Bird. That is really not ideal. In comes Shadow Camerupt. Camerupt would love to get a shield call right on the Scorching Sands, and then look to deal big damage with his own Scorching Sands, but there's a Fire Punch bait from the Diggersby. That's going to force Camerupt to surrender both Protect Shields. They go for a second Fire Punch bait. The absolute madman. Fire Punch after Fire Punch. Camerupt doubles up on Scorching Sands, but Diggersby survives, and that's going to be a charge stack priority tie. That's bad news for Camerupt, is forced to throw the second Scorching Sands, but the opponent makes a fatal error. They surrender the final shield. And any theme of an Aegislash team is the moment your opponent surrenders their final shield, they're probably going to be in trouble. Aegislash is going to be answered with Aegislash. One Shadow Ball does not take the knockout in the mirror, however. It will do an incredible amount of damage, but it will not secure the KO. Shadow Ball lands, there's the switch into the Galarian Moltres. Galarian Moltres is now going to be hit with the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball is resisted, but I'm very confident it will be taking the knockout. Well, they actually went for the Gyro Ball, they covered for the switch, and now it's Aegislash versus Aegislash. The opponent sends in Malamar. Malamar is desperately trying to make it to the back-to-back foul plays. If it does not get there, it loses the game. Aegislash is doubled up, so Malamar needs the second foul play, and it just simply does not have it. Aegislash gets to the Shadow Ball. This will be taking the knockout. The opponent still has their own Aegislash and 1 HP on a Diggersby. So you just have to watch at the top right corner and see whatever comes in. It's the Diggersby. The Psycho Cut takes the knockout, and that's going to be a win, as the opponent is in shield form Aegislash, which means they lose charge stack priority by a mile. Shadow Ball takes the knockout, and that's a good game. We move to game number 4, and Galarian Moltres is feasting on the leads today as it leads into Galarian Corsola. But an Empoleon save switch could prove to be a little bit problematic. Empoleon is going to farm up, fire off the Hydro Cannon, and that's an immediate no shield from the Moltres. Oh, I actually love this play pattern. In comes Camerupt, and Camerupt should actually be able to get the full farm down as the opponent is now 5 off their next Hydro. Shield comes up from the Camerupt. Camerupt gonna, no, it doesn't go for the farm down. I believe the Empoleon was 5 off there. So unfortunately, a bit of a misplay by Absol. Down goes the Empoleon, but could have got so much value from farming down with the Camerupt. Now Camerupt is only gonna make it to 1 charge stack instead of 2. Rock Tomb no shielded by the Corsola. Corsola pays a pretty heavy price, and Corsola is actually forced to throw energy. That is so funny. Corsola can't farm down the Camerupt. In comes Moltres. There's Wigglytuff in the back, and there's just no way out for this trainer. Aegislash just gets the farm up to 100 energy very comfortably. The Moltres has a ton of energy as well, and even if they debuff the Gyro Ball enough to where it doesn't take the knockout, it still inflicts a ton of damage. An important thing to note that I'm just now realizing is this is actually a pretty bad IV Aegislash. This is a raid IV Aegislash. A good IV Aegislash would definitely be preferred. Aegislash gonna fire off the back-to-back Gyro Balls, but the switch timer is up. The opponent could try and go for a snipe with Corsola. In comes Moltres, reading the snipe perfectly, and that is such a perfect prediction. In comes Wigglytuff just to get smacked with a Brave Bird, and if Brave Bird doesn't take the knockout, there's still a very healthy Aegislash. Brave Bird barely misses the knockout, but in comes Aegislash. Honestly, I'm hoping to see a Shadow Ball BM. That would kind of make my day at this point. Wigglytuff goes for the Icy Wind. They're playing it out to the bitter end. Let's go. The Shadow Ball BM. Get that Wigglytuff out of here. Aegislash changes the blade form. Shadow Ball double resisted takes the knockout to secure the win. We move to the next match, Galarian Moltres into Shadow Quagsire. Now the question will be, is this the triple water team? If it is the triple water team, then unfortunately Camerupt would not have a lot of places that it could go. I didn't see a Mudshot sneak through there, so this should be a charge stack priority tie, and the Quagsire ends up no shielding. That's actually kind of bad, because ideally Aegislash wants shields down from the opponent. In comes Empoleon, and the only potential counterplay is to send in the Aegislash. Aegislash, unfortunately, has an opponent that still has 2 Protect Shields intact, but this is where the bulk of Aegislash is very, very helpful. Aegislash should try and CMP tie as the opponent doubles up, and does exactly that. That is the perfect play pattern here, because this way the Empoleon cannot threaten the knockout just yet, because it won charge stack priority. It has the Hydro Cannon, but it's going to have to give a shield back, otherwise it's getting one-shot by the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball will be shielded. It's a simultaneous switch Moltres into the Quagsire. Quagsire unfortunately survives on 1 HP to leave with a parting gift of an Aqua Tail. Moltres is now firmly in Hydro Cannon range, and that is a problem. Moltres has to let itself go, because the only play now is to go for a 1-shield hyper-aggressive farm down with the Shadow Camerupt. But will Camerupt actually be able to take the knockout here with the 4th Incinerate? It's going to be very, very close. Camerupt has to hope. Hydro Cannon will be shielded. There's a pivot out into Feraligatr, and this is really not ideal. However, there's still some energy loaded on the Aegislash, and that could help. In comes Aegislash. The threat of a Shadow Ball is going to force energy. I believe the Feraligatr is now completely energy dry, so Camerupt should be able to do 2 here, go for the charge star priority tie, and the game comes down to this. Does Empoleon get knocked out by the next Incinerate? It's going to be very, very close. In comes Empoleon. They survive, and unfortunately, that is going to do it. The Empoleon, too healthy, barely hanging on, and that game will end in defeat. Picking up a very tricky lead in the next match, Galarian Moltres into Florges. If Florges is not running Disarming Voice, then honestly Galarian Moltres doesn't do the worst there, but an immediate Camerupt save switch will actually put a lot of pressure onto the opponent's team. They're going to send in a Guzzlord, and this is an incredible bait out. Camerupt going to launch Rock Tomb no shielded by the Guzzlord, but because the Guzzlord is debuffed, I now have full faith that a Brutal Swing will not take the knockout. Those Incinerates have been shredding the Guzzlord as well. Brutal Swing is going to connect. Immediate undertap from the Camerupt. Now the Guzzlord has to shield or they're getting knocked out. They will put up the shield, getting a full farm down. However, this energy isn't particularly threatening. This is a debuffed Guzzlord, and Sludge Bomb does not get same type attack bonus, so for Moltres, this feels like a pretty easy no shield. Sludge Bomb lands. That damage was honestly a little bit pathetic. Come on, Guzzlord, you can do better. Guzzlord going for another Sludge Bomb. Moltres still doesn't care. Moltres going to commit to the farm down. Guzzlord dies with a Brutal Swing, and that is a massive swing of momentum. Opponent sends back in the Florges, but this Brave Bird is going to hurt. Brave Bird connects, Florges gets KO'd, in the back is Jellicent, and this game is over. There's still a Galarian Moltres that has a decent amount of energy, but honestly, I don't even think the Moltres is going to be needed. This is the Aegislash show. Shadow Ball lands, Aegislash simply does not care. Opponent does throw on alignment, and that does give a free charging over to Aegislash. Aegislash is going to shield up the Surf Bait and throw one and the Shadow Ball. Aegislash can now take advantage of the fact that it's going to switch to Blade Form and have Psycho Cut, which has significantly faster pacing. So Shadow Ball is going to be shielded. Aegislash only 2 away, and that was absolute brilliance. Aegislash at its finest, taking the knockout with Jellicent and securing the win. We move to the next game, Galarian Moltres into Shadow Feraligatr. Shadow Feraligatr is a problem Pokemon for this team, but if you're going to see it anywhere, you definitely want to see it on the lead. Feraligatr is going to be winning Charge Attack priority over the Galarian Moltres. Moltres calls the bait. Oh, what a bait call. If that was Ice Beam, that could have been catastrophic, but a Stone Cold bait call from Absol means that now he has the advantage early in this game. Feraligatr is going to fire off energy. Moltres is just going to let itself go because this is now going to be a one-shield farm down for Shadow Camerupt. In comes Shadow Camerupt, and my goodness, look at those Incinerates go. Camerupt has the shield. Hydro Cannon would probably KO every Camerupt in existence, and in comes Clodsire. I don't think Clodsire is going to like what comes next. Camerupt up so much energy, connects with the Scorching Sands, and that damage is devastating. Clodsire makes a last-second charge attack, but Camerupt can just shield, farm down, and this is rock plus ground coverage. It goes absolutely everywhere. If they bring in the Feraligatr, I'm pretty sure the Feraligatr just gets farmed down by Incinerates. The opponent's thinking through their options. What are they going to do? It's a Ferrothorn! What is a Ferrothorn doing here? That is not an Open Great League Pokemon. Ferrothorn has to shield the Scorching Sands. Ferrothorn just getting absolutely torn to smithereens by Camerupt. Another Scorching Sands, another knockout. Who even needs Aegislash? It's the Shadow Camerupt show, taking all 3 knockouts to secure the win. We move to the next match, leading Galarian Moltres into Shadow Annihilate, and this is actually a counter Annihilate. The first few weeks of the season, Low Kick Annihilate was everywhere, but it seems like Medicham has kind of won the war as being the premier fighter. That's just because Medicham's bulk is absolutely absurd. Annihilate is a Pokemon that can be very strong, but Annihilate frequently needs shields to be used on it, whereas Medicham is a very bulky addition to a team where if you put Medicham on the team, you can pair it with Glacier Things. So Medicham has actually emerged victorious as the dominant fighter. In comes Camerupt getting a nice farm down. Opponent sends in a Wigglytuff. If they're bringing in Wigglytuff, how weak are they in the back? Is there a Fortress back there? Rock Tomb into the Wigglytuff is going to be no shielded. Wigglytuff getting absolutely crushed by Incinerates. And they just top left, so it must have been Fortress. Galarian Moltres is met with a terrible lead in the next match, leading into Alolan Ninetales. Safe switch into Shadow Camerupt is going to be answered with a Shadow Feraligatr, and unfortunately the opponent did switch fast enough that they will always be able to outpace here. At the very least, Camerupt does want to try and get shields down, because shields down is where that Aegislash is going to shine. I really like the play from Camerupt here to throw 2 in the move, because if the opponent didn't CMP-tie, then Camerupt could have got both shields. But unfortunately, they did, and that's going to force a final shield out of Camerupt. Camerupt undertapping here as it fires off the Scorching Sands. Rock Tomb would have taken the knockout anyway, and the opponent is going to go for a double shield. Scorching Sands ends up getting that debuff, which is quite nice, and this can hopefully set up Aegislash to win the game. But Aegislash gets a nasty catch of the Ice Beam. That is very nice, and the opponent reveals their final Pokemon is Jellicent. However, Aegislash having taken a little bit of damage could actually be to its detriment. Aegislash now going to take some more damage from Shadow Ball as it lands, Aegislash going to throw 2 in the move, and this hex damage will never register because the Shadow Ball will take the knockout. Now it's going to be a race to the move. Can Aegislash in its blade form survive and make it to the Gyro Ball? It's going to be close. In comes the Ninetales, but Aegislash falls just shy of the Gyro Ball, and that's going to be a loss. The final match is going to be against a trainer who's already hit Legend this season, and it appears they're just tanking with Spice, because this is a Galarian Moltres leading into Flygon. Flygon is just getting obliterated by these sucker punches. This is very unfortunate. Flygon fires off the Twister on the charge type priority to Galarian Moltres' Fly. Galarian Moltres' Fly would easily take the knockout. Shield comes up from the Flygon. There's going to be a safe switch into Feraligatr. But Feraligatr cannot make it to the Ice Beam before Galarian Moltres will make the Fly. Fly no shielded by the Feraligatr, and that's probably the best case scenario. Oh no, the opponent accidentally farms too much. They lose all of their Feraligatr energy, and that is probably just going to end in a loss. Especially with the Fortress revealed as the final Pokemon. It's the Volt Switch Fortress. Fortress going to be hit with the Brave Bird. Brave Bird connects. Camerupt snipes down with an Incinerate, and the opponent's going to concede the match. All in all, I think this is easily the coolest team to make it to top 50 in the world on the Go Battle League leaderboards this season. Galarian Moltres has always been a bit of a favorite Pokemon of mine ever since it was released, but the fact that Galarian Moltres is somehow the least cool mod on this team is very, very impressive. There's Shadow Camerupt, which is incredibly cool. There's Aegislash in the back, and we know how powerful Aegislash is. Aegislash is just an absolute terror, but also the fact that every Pokemon on this team can kind of threaten one-hit knockouts. There's Brave Bird on Galarian Moltres. There's any move Camerupt throws at anything, because Camerupt just has really good coverage, and its attack stat is absurd. And Aegislash's ability to turn into Blade form, and then just wipe Pokemon off the face of the earth. This team is all offense all the time, and it looks incredibly fun to play. However, an important word of caution, and part of the reason why at the start I mentioned that I don't think this is a team that I would recommend for players, and that's because in my eyes this is a very high skill ceiling team. Both Aegislash and Shadow Camerupt in my eyes are very unwieldy Pokemon. They are exceedingly strong, but they have very high downside as well. If you don't put them in a position to succeed, then the downside for both the Pokemon is pretty catastrophic. The goal for Aegislash is almost always to try and force your opponent's shields down, because if you can get their shields down, then Aegislash just absorbs infinite hits, farms up to the back-to-back moves, and if it can't one-shot you with the Shadow Ball or Gyro Ball, it can probably two-shot you. For Shadow Camerupt, it's all about just trying to get an energy advantage, but making sure that you have a shield intact. In my eyes, Aegislash is probably the highest skill ceiling Pokemon in the entire game. It's also one of the most common Pokemon that I encounter when battling every day in the 2900s. Aegislash is something you'll just see multiple times per set in the 2900s because it's just simply that strong. About half of the early Legend teams all have Aegislash on them, and it's for good reason. The player base is very quickly figuring out how to play Aegislash and unlock its true potential, and this Pokemon is an absolute terror. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is so appreciated, so thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.